I'm Claire Murray and we're here at the EWTN studios in Walsingham, England's Nazareth. I'm here with Stephanie Block, who is the goddaughter of Alice von Hildebrand, who of course was married to the great philosopher Dietrich. Now, we have an incredible story to be told here today, and we're going to be in conversation about many of the things that matter to the philosophy of womanhood in the church and in the world, and particularly in this place of the mystery of the Annunciation with our Blessed Mother, and how all this ties in with what true feminism is and what Our Lady has to teach us in the parallels of the philosophy of this legacy that you're going to talk about. So welcome, Stephanie. Stephanie is a mother to 7 children, one who is a priest, a daughter who is a Dominican sister, and 29 grandchildren, with room for many more on the way.
With room for many more.
And Stephanie, you have a particular link to Our Lady of Walsingham because you've recently moved to the shrine in Houston.
Well, it's the Cathedral of Walsingham, which is the seat for the ordinariate of the United States and Canada.
Wonderful.
So it was a joy to be here.
Yeah. And you've been brought to England for the first time coming to the UK?
It's the first time I've been in the UK.
And particularly to give lectures on the philosophy that Alice held, because you were a student of hers at one point?
Well, that's maybe putting it a little grandly. I'm not a philosopher, but I was a student of hers. And I entered the church for many reasons, but largely because she changed how I looked at the world and was able then to accept Catholicism. After I had that foundation, I was still interested in the practical aspects of philosophy, but I really don't have the mind for the distinctions and the very careful logical thinking that's necessary for clear philosophical thought, but loved her dearly and had the privilege of reading through some of her manuscripts because her first language was French, and although she was a very gifted linguist, it was useful to have other eyes, and particularly one that was a native English speaker.
So what is Alice's legacy of thinking on womanhood and feminism in relationship to the church that has so impacted on you, and what do you want to impart to our viewers today about that?
I think the first thing that impressed me with her, she was educated by aristocratic French nuns, and she came into this kind of tough New York public college. Petite, soft-spoken, very genteel, elegant, and there are a lot of, because she was Catholic and a woman, they put her at the night school, hoping, I think, to
put her off.
maybe discourage her from staying. And she has an interview with Father Mitch Pacwa where she says, she came in there with fear and trembling. I'm not sure that was really the case, because I think she had us more in fear and trembling by the end of the class, because she was so very, she had a peasant's wit, she would say. She was very funny, but so shrewd and sharp and on point. But so my coming in there as a young, secular, feminist, hotshot teenager who thought she knew something about philosophy, and I'd read Jean-Paul Sartre, I'd read Camus, I'd read Paul Tillich, so I knew all the, I thought I knew a lot more than I did. And I was very impressed by the fact that she was a woman and that she was a professor, and I was expecting her to confirm all of my preconceptions. And of course, her very first question, that very first class, when I was 18 and had just entered college, was, "What is truth?" I knew the answer. I raised my hand, she called on me, and I said, well, of course, truth is relative and unchanging. And I thought, that's so brilliant. She's just going to put me straight into graduate school. I'm not going to have to bother with this BA stuff. And then she spent the rest of the class tearing that down. Very genteelly and with great kindness, but I was so angry. I couldn't believe that anyone in this day and age could think as she was thinking, but I was also intrigued. So I came back and I had lots of questions. I had my ammunition already. I had books at home that were open with the underlined passages, and she stopped me and she said, "You don't even know the right questions to ask yet. Wait until the end of the semester, and if you still have these questions, we can talk about it, but you don't have enough background yet. She was right. It was so humiliating. So when you ask what my first relationship to her as in the sphere of feminism and womanhood, it was meeting this beautifully feminine woman who was quite a professional, an incredibly accomplished woman, as accomplished as anyone I've ever met. And having her think in a way that was totally 180 degrees antithetical to anything I thought a woman should be thinking. And it was humbling, but it enabled a world to open up of love and joy and happiness that at 18 I was suicidal, because of if there was nothing but the things that I was looking at, it really didn't make a whole lot of sense to keep going on with the pain of it. And to suddenly have this other option, which was so much richer and more exciting than anything that I could have imagined.
So what was she saying that was so different to what you were being imparted from a different sort of worldview?
Well, I'd have to give you a whole course in Introduction to Philosophy, but the gist of it in a very simple way was simply that she convinced me that there is a truth. Now, what exactly that meant took a lot more work. But the fact that there is truth that I could know and it was objective and outside of me meant it had a lot of consequences. If there's no truth, if I make up the truth, if morality is whatever I make it, if the world is whatever I make it, if there's no God, if there's nothing outside of me, if I'm God, I know how small I am. As much as I thought of myself at 18. And it just isn't very much. It's not, I didn't have a bad life, but there was nothing, there's, in Faust, there's that Goethe is looking for something to say, stop, for this I would die for. And he can't find anything, and he goes around, it's not romantic love, it's not beauty, it's not, and it isn't until he sees the Blessed Mother, he sees heaven, he sees the vision of heaven through the Blessed Mother that he says, stop. I don't think I have it quite right. I think it was that I would give up my soul for this. That this is worth anything, everything. And so laying that foundation of that there is a truth, that it's objective, that it can be found, that's the foundation for anything else.
And did you have one of those Faust moments in a sense of this dialogue that was going on and this process going on in a very deep place to lead you into the Catholic Church to then come into contact with the Blessed
that's such a
Virgin Mary?
complicated story. You really want me to go there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
part of this story for you.
Okay. Well. So that was the intellectual foundation, and that. It came about, my conversion came about in 3 parts. So the first part was could there be a God? Could there, if there's truth, if there is reality, that just opens up a whole other set of possibilities. And then my father, who was an older man, he had been himself working, before, at one point he was working on his doctorate at Columbia University in aesthetics. And so she permitted me in my, I guess the last year of my sophomore year, to take a graduate aesthetics course with him, which was a lot of fun. And he had gone to college with his dad. So, there was just a whole lot of interesting parallels there. And he was he was so resistant to what he was hearing, even on the aesthetic level. We weren't getting into metaphysics or anything. But he went and he was interested, which was kind of fun. So he'd come to at this point my parents had moved out of the apartment that I'd grown up in, but I'd kept the apartment because it was rent controlled. This was New York City. So when they would come to visit into town, they would stay at the apartment with me. So because he was going to classes with me, he stayed at the apartment that night with my mother. And I went to sleep in my room, and I was awakened by the thought, I guess, what will you do if your father dies? Mm. And it was like, like being slapped with cold water in the middle of the night. I didn't know. He meant so much to me. Just as I started to relax again, I spent maybe an hour thinking about this, and as I started to relax again, my mother knocks on the door, and my father was going out. He'd had a heart attack, and was being carried out. So I rode in the ambulance with him, and my mother drove behind the ambulance, I guess. And I can't explain this, but I saw his soul peel from his body. And I had absolutely no foundation for that experience. It was just the strangest. How do I condense this into? Many things happened, but I ended up later that day, after my family was with my mother, and it was because I had an association with the Presbyterian Church at that point. I was tasked with going to the minister and arranging for the funeral, but I couldn't get a hold of him. But there was a little Episcopalian church across the street, teeny, about the size of this room, very beautiful, very much in the high church style. And there was nobody there. There was an altar, but a huge, I guess that's the gospel stand there with a huge gospel, one of these big old-fashioned gospels. And I knew nothing, believe me, I knew nothing about my faith. But I'm sitting there thinking, again, it's like a little voice inside my head that's saying, that's a big book up there, and it's comforted a lot of people. Maybe there's something in there that would comfort you. So I go and I just open it, and I've written down what the verses were, but I'm not going to get them in order. But one was, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I closed the book and I sat down. Stained glass windows, they're Tiffany glass windows, beautiful little church. And I'm thinking, boy, that's quite a coincidence. Here I am, raised in scientific method, and that's a big book. There's a lot of begats, and every time I've looked in there, it's genealogies of people, and then the voice is saying, well, try it again. If it's a coincidence, what do you have to lose? So I open it up again, and it's, we are orphans, we are fatherless, our fathers are no more, something like that. I close it, I say, that's crazy. But then the same argument with myself is, well, if it's really a coincidence, it won't happen again. Nah, I don't want to test the Lord, Oh, so you do believe, huh? No, of course I don't believe. I mean, it just was an odd. I did it again, and again, it was the same kind of thing. It was very pertinent to the moment, and so pertinent and so strange that it would have been unscientific not to believe, Yes. So that was the movement. I was now a believer in God, and then again, associated with my father's death, there were just incidents that happened. This has nothing to do with the von Hildebrands, but that brought me to Jesus. And then I grew up in New York City, and at that point in time, all the Catholic churches were open. So whenever I would have a problem, it was just very easy to slip into the church, and I had I guess I did maybe on some visceral level, but I had no idea that God was there in a special way. And yet it was good to be there. But someone took me to a Lithuanian national church, so it was still, it's a Catholic church, but it wasn't under the Archbishop of New York City, so they were able to keep doing it was a Novus Ordo Latin Mass with the Missa de Angelis. They had someone playing the organ, and I was home. It was that unintellectual and
Disconnected.
connected. And then I went to Alice and said, well, now what do I do? And she sent me to a priest who she was connected with, and we went through the Baltimore Catechism. And I have to say, I do not understand why people hated that Baltimore Catechism so much, because, I mean, just those first 3, why did God make you? You know, it's just so beautiful and so simple and so true. But anyway, so that was my entrance into the church. She became my godmother. It was very scary to get kind of conditionally rebaptized. My husband, who's also a convert, but he's from Judaism, he gets baptized and everything's wiped away, because I was a Protestant and I had been presumably baptized before. I still had to go to confession, so that was hard. But that's my story.
Necessary part of the journey, eh?
Yeah.
And in you coming into the Catholic Church and the parallels between thinking about femininity and something about what Alice has sort of passed on in her legacy and her wide thinking philosophically, what it means to be a woman, and what does it mean for today to be a woman, to be a true, in our true femininity. When do you remember first being introduced to the Blessed Virgin Mary, and how has this all been part of shaping your journey of femininity?
She was hard, because as a Protestant, you're kind of brainwashed. It's interesting because my foundation in Protestantism wasn't very deep in some ways, but in prejudicial ways it was deep. So confession was hard because you don't tell anybody anything, you know. That's you have a stiff upper lip, a strong front, you know. At least in my family. Anything that smacked of idol worship, you know, maybe we didn't believe in God, but you don't honor a statue. I mean, it's just art. So I had to sort of suspend criticism for a while, and the way it was presented to me, either, I don't know if it was Alice who's told me this directly, but some of her better formed students, you know, who were further along on the journey, were saying, you know, at this point, if you can accept it as, you know, intellectually, the rest will come, the relationship will come. And I think it's really interesting because for my husband, it's come very quickly. He actually maybe embraced Mary the first thing of his Catholic journey, whereas for me it's been many years of realizing, you know, and actually there are a lot of saints that I had a warm friendship with, but it took me a while for her, I guess because she's such a symbol of the Catholic. There's so many lies that are told, and it just took a while to emotionally overcome those.
Which is interesting. We're sitting here on the first Saturday, we're just doing reparation for all those lies told against the Blessed Virgin Mary and her Immaculate Heart. But it's wonderful that we can make that reparation.
Oh my goodness.
Stephanie, thank you so much for being with us. We could talk so much about this, but I'm so grateful to you for coming to EWTN and being in Walsingham with us.
Thank you so much.
God bless you.